Welcome to the Idaho Sheriff live stream broadcast with Dan Wilson for Kootenai County Sheriff. My name is Donna Wilson. I'm here fielding your questions and comments. We will get those to Dan throughout the program. You can do that by entering them into the comment section on whichever platform you're watching, Facebook, YouTube, or Instagram. Also, a reminder right now, hit that share button so we can also get this out to your friends and family. We are here to spread the message of liberty without compromise.
Yeah.
And now, endorsed by Sheriff Richard Mack himself, this is the man, Dan Wilson.
Hey, everyone. How are you doing? Thanks so much for joining us tonight. As always, big thank you to all who are watching, not only right here in Kootenai County, but across the entire great state and into eastern Idaho and western Montana, around the world. Thanks for coming in, where we are discussing all things liberty without compromise, and more specifically, as your new candidate for Kootenai County Sheriff and the next sheriff, I'm here to connect with you all.
Number
right
14.
Here. Number 14. I'm here to connect with you all and to answer your questions, field your comments. I want you all to know who I am and my passion for this country and for this county.
All right, what do we have coming up?
Well, we got a lot of fun things coming up in the next few days. Tomorrow is the 4th of July, my favorite holiday period. And it brings back a lot of childhood memories, good childhood memories. But tomorrow we're going to be down at the Coeur d'Alene Parade, and I'm going to be walking with many of you, my supporters and friends. We're hoping to have a large turnout. We're going to be giving out T-shirts to the first.
Now look, we've only got 29. We've only got 29 T-shirts to give out.
29?
Because one of them is for Sal. If I don't set it aside for Sal, I'm dead meat. But the numbers are growing. We've had a lot of response.
Yeah.
So I have a feeling some of you might be fighting over the T-shirts that we have.
Well, if you don't get a T-shirt, we'll try to work something out for you. But yeah, we are... we're only limited to 30, and we're very grateful for our vendor who is able to turn them on a dime, and the quality is outstanding. These shirts are my very own favorite of all T-shirts, and some people have accused me of wearing European medium.
Oh, yeah. That was an old accusation.
I know,
You're bringing it back.
But I want others to experience these T-shirts. So you're going to be wearing my personal favorite T-shirts of all time.
Well, because you know what? It's soft.
It is.
It's not the typical like merch T-shirt. This one is, it's soft.
Where a crew neck
comfy.
looks like a V-neck.
Yeah, it sags down. Yeah.
So if you happen to be in the Coeur d'Alene area tomorrow and you want to come join me as I walk the parade route, meet us at 15th and Sherman Avenue at 8 a.m. sharp. We want to be extremely respectful of the event coordinator who is, graciously allowed us to come and be a part of this. We have a lineup. I believe we're number 27?
Number 27.
So number 27, we want to be extremely respectful. We want to show them that we are a respectful group. So please be there on time, and we'll start sorting things out. We'll give T-shirts to the first 29 now, since one's already gone. But
Michael Hopkins gets one too.
Oh, okay.
So we're now we're at 28. Yeah, right. They're going fast.
Now, Saturday, it is July 6th.
Yes.
And I'm also going to be at the Bayview Parade. So if you happen to be up in the Athol, Bayview, Spirit Lake area, Northern Hayden, if you're from south, maybe you're Worley or Harrison, and you want to come up to the north end of the county, come on up there. We'd love to see you there. And I want to talk to each and every one of you to spread the message of hope and one of courage. All of us banding together to make this county the most secure county in the entire country. So I'm extremely stoked about it. Now, did you tell them to go to theidahosheriff.com?
I didn't. I thought you were going to do that.
Nah, you're better at it than I am.
Well, we got lots of info at theidahosheriff.com. Always a reminder that if you have not submitted your email address to the posse there at theidahosheriff.com, to do that, because we're able to send out information and updates like an invitation to join us in the Coeur d'Alene Parade tomorrow. That was sent out earlier in the week. So if you missed that, it may be because you're not on the list. Not only more than that, we're constantly putting media updates, videos, podcasts that Dan has been a guest on. So anything you really ever want to know about Dan Wilson, why should I vote this guy? It's there. You could spend hours rifling through the idahosheriff.com.
Now, before we get to talk about the things today that are, I don't know, they're timely because it's around the 4th, and I really want to spend some of the night talking about my favorite part of American history, and that's the Declaration of Independence. We're going to talk a little bit about that, but before that, I want to point people to the idahosheriff.com, specifically the page that talks about Bob Norris and Dan Wilson's answers to the KCRCC Vetting Committee questionnaire survey. I don't know if I said that right, but we can show them. We have pulled that up so you guys can see where it's at, but it is a side-by-side comparison of the answers of both myself and Bob Norris response to the Kootenai County Republican Central Committee's questions for candidates.
Now, before you get too far into that, one of the reasons this is important is, and it wasn't even a week or two ago, we had an email with a legitimate question from somebody who honestly wanted to know about you and understand more about your campaign, why you were running, but really felt it was a handicapper that you were at a disadvantage because, hey, why, if you're a conservative dude, you're calling yourself constitutional sheriff, why did you not go through the KCRCC vetting process?
Right.
So we might be sitting here however many months into this thinking we sound like a broken record, although I know we absolutely don't, because we have people joining us day by day along this journey.
Yeah.
And so
if they want to know why I personally went independent instead of Republican, well, we have those answers in previous episodes, different articles we've written. So I am running as an independent, but at my heart of hearts, I am a conservative. And I think look at the responses that I gave to the KCRCC vetting committee, along with what Bob Norris did. I believe you'll understand the vast differences between a career lawman, always on the government payroll, Bob Norris, who also is on $182,000 per year disability retirement from the state of California. It's important that you can actually look side by side to see who we are. Dan Wilson is not a career politician, never been a politician. I've never been on the government payroll. I've volunteered 12 years of my time to my local community and government. But I think you'll start to see the differences between the two of us men and why I believe that I am the only candidate, the only choice, rather, for the people of Kootenai County going into the uncertain times that we are facing. And you need somebody with vision, somebody that has a good idea globally what's going on and how we can preserve this county, bringing everyone together, liberty without compromise. And, I think that one of the other myths that I want to dispel, and that is that Dan Wilson is going to be a vote splitter. So at a recent meet and greet, one of the questions that I fielded was, aren't you going to split the vote between you and Bob and a Democrat? And it's a legitimate question. And I had to kindly respond, well, yes, I definitely am going to split the vote. And that vote is going to be split between Bob Norris and myself. The Democrats did not run anybody this year, nor did the Constitutional Party. So in the primary, which already came and went May 21 of this year, there are only 2 sheriff candidates running.
Well, I like what you said when somebody asked the question. Again, it was a sincere question because they've heard that going around. And you said, well, yeah, the vote is going to be split between
Bob Norris and myself. Yeah. So, yeah, you can rest assured there are no Democrats that can come in at the last moment, and we're not going to be splitting any votes. So, and by the way, you should probably go back to Bob Norris and say, hey, Bob, if that were true, why don't you drop out? Because you've already had your 4 years. You haven't done enough for the county. You have done nothing to get this county prepared for the next COVID end run. You've had 4 years. You've done things for some of your deputy gangs in the Deputy Sheriff's Association, but yeah, you really haven't done anything for the good of the county. So why don't you drop out and Dan Wilson will take your case.
Bob Norris is splitting the vote.
Yeah.
Splitting the vote.
Look, I love this time of year. When I was a kid, my dad would have these gigantic barbecues in his backyard, and we'd have these fish fries and barbecues. And one of the things, and I wish I would have queued this up, that I absolutely believe in my life as part of my Fourth of July experience was the John Wayne "I Love America" soundtrack. And I'm going to have to find that later on and
Well,
play that.
I don't know that we can play it because it would be
No,
copyright.
no, no. You and me are going to play it later on.
Oh,
Yeah,
got it.
We could have played a little snippet.
So everybody go play that when the show's over.
But you
Go
know,
play it.
patriotism is something that I believe most people in Kootenai County and frankly around this country still believe in. I grew up as a kid in the 70s and 80s, and I remember how patriotic this country was. We believed in our military. We believed in our president. We believed in the America that stood for truth and justice and morality. And over time, many circumstances way beyond our control crept in and started to make that dream fade. But you know what? That shining light that was once nearly extinguished has reignited. And I am so pleased to see many patriotic Americans that love this country finally standing up to do something and to make a difference and to call out wrong when it's wrong, to do good to those that they can when it's within their capacity, and to start holding their elected officials accountable. Now, my belief is most of Congress is corrupt. In fact, probably 99%. There's 2 or 3 in Congress that I actually like. I like Trump, but Trump is not our savior. And remember, folks, in this country, we do not have kings and we are not subservient to anyone. But 248 years ago, we were facing some very similar circumstances in this continent before we were a country. And of course, there cannot be a 4th of July celebration without discussing and reading those great words of Thomas Jefferson, who was the majority author of the Declaration of Independence. And I would like everybody to indulge me as I read the beginning of the Declaration of Independence. And I'm reading it out of this U.S. Constitution and other writings book that a dear friend gave to me here recently. When in the course of human events, it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bands which have connected them with another, and to assume among the powers of the earth the separate and equal station to which the laws of nature and of nature's God entitle them. A decent respect to the opinions of mankind requires that they should declare the causes which impel them to the separation. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Powerful words. I'll go on. And that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. That whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or to abolish it and to institute new government, laying its foundation on such principles and organizing its powers in such form as to them shall seem most likely to affect their safety and happiness. Prudence indeed will dictate that governments long established should not be changed for light and transient causes, and accordingly all experience has shown that mankind are more disposed to suffer while evils are sufferable than to right themselves by abolishing the forms to which they are accustomed. But when a long train of abuses and usurpations, pursuing invariably the same object, evinces a design to reduce them under absolute despotism, it is their right, it is their duty to throw off such government and to provide new guards for their future security. Such has been the patient sufferance of these colonies, and such is now the necessity which constrains them to alter their former systems of government. Powerful words. And of course, it goes on to list out the grievances that the Americans had with King George. And if you were to read those right now, and of course it's too long for us to read here, but we probably should have. If you were to go and pull this up, you look at the complaints and you start substituting current modern day government agencies in place of those other names that were used by the early Americans. It is eerily strange, the coincidence of how close the verbiage is from then to now. I want to remind you all that the founders understood men's hearts, men's disposition, their ability to take something good in human nature to turn it wrong. And when they declared this independence, they declared it not by saying we are going to go to war. They merely drew upon the laws of nature and nature's God. John Locke, who predated the founders by over 100 years, that there is a natural law in the universe, that a creator created all of man, and he created all men equal, period. And that every man has the right to life, to liberty, and to property or the pursuit of happiness. But when governments get out of control and the consent of the people is no longer first and foremost for that form of government, it is the duty of those people to change that form of government and not to suffer when they need not suffer anymore, but to actually take control and either abolish that government or change the government back to the way it's supposed to be. And I always remind those that listen to me at live events, we are governed at the consent of us. That's what government's basic function was in the first place. It was like-minded people with similar backgrounds that gathered together and said, in order for us to be able to protect our rights, individuals' rights to life, liberty, and property, it requires us banding together and forming a government, if you will, whose majority are far better equipped to protect the individual's rights. Government was never made to create tons of laws that punish the people. It was to prohibit any form of usurping or trampling upon those laws of nature and nature's God, those rights given to us by a creator. And look at the mess that we have now 248 years later. But our founders were very brilliant. They were brilliant because when they formed the Constitution and the Bill of Rights, they understood that we can't have centralized power. We have to have dual governments, parallel governments, independent, separate from each other, accountable to each other, but not bending their knees to each other. So remember that right here at Kootenai County level, we are every bit as sovereign as the federal government. And you have to have a sheriff protecting you who understands the rights to life, liberty, and property, that understands the intent of the framers and why it was so important to them that the Bill of Rights existed. And your sheriff is the last line of defense for the people, the interposition between an out-of-control, unaccountable government and the individual. That was almost a very long dialogue, but I'm passionate about our founders. I'm passionate about the heritage that was given to us, and I think it's great to remember it. So,
and for those of you who are listening, if those are unfamiliar words to you or something you haven't studied since high school, something you don't often think about, we're interested to hear your comments as to why that is. Or if you were thinking more recently, with the state of our nation, the state of our union, the unrest, the things even going on locally, maybe you've spent more time thinking about how this country was founded and what the people sacrificed to get to that place, and you want to immerse yourself more in it. Is it something you're thinking more often about now? Maybe you thought it wasn't all that important, and now you're kind of getting it.
Yeah.
Tell us where you are on the spectrum of things.
A great resource that I would highly encourage all of you out there to take advantage of is Hillsdale College Constitutional 101. They're free online courses. You can watch the lecture, you can read the resources, you can print them off, you can test, but it's a great resource to break down the founders and the Constitution in bite-sized, easy, digestible segments. And you can go back and keep watching them. I've watched the series so many times because I remember or learn something new at each step. And
Well, and it's the way that it's presented. By far, any other resource that I've ever had for U.S. history, Constitution, what the culture was like at that time. Why? I mean, they'll even go into discussion about slavery, and it's not political.
Yeah.
They just help you understand how people were living at that time and the things that drove where we were at as a country and
historical
as a people at those
context
times.
is always
Yes.
very important.
Yeah.
We look at things back then with our eyes of today. Hindsight is not helpful to putting yourself in the shoes of those men and women from 250 years ago compared to what we now know. So, if you happen to have any questions, remember to drop them in the comments. I know that it's right before a long holiday, and this is a holiday that I'm glad is here. So we may not get a lot of questions tonight, but we always want to meet the public at least once a week. Last week, of course, we had to postpone by 2 nights. We broadcast last time on a Friday night.
Yeah, that was not typical, and we're normally here every week, Wednesday night at 7 p.m. I do have a question that came in through Facebook, so sometimes that happens through Dan's Facebook page. That's the Idaho Sheriff on Facebook. So if you're not following that one, do that, because you're going to get into your feed. You're going to see some of the videos that he's sharing, the things that are really important to the local scene here in Kootenai County. And so this is one came in a week or so ago. What do you think about the noise ordinance in Coeur d'Alene? So we're really switching gears with this question, I know, but this is one that's pertinent to a lot of us locally who often, if you don't live right in Coeur d'Alene, we're often in and out of downtown Coeur d'Alene to visit and shop, walk around.
Setting the scene, downtown Coeur d'Alene is right next to the lake, and it's as Donna said, a resort town. Lots of pedestrians out walking, families, all sorts of community members enjoying the city life of downtown Coeur d'Alene and the lakefront and every place you can hike in the water. And look, over the past 25 years that I've been walking downtown Coeur d'Alene in the summer, quite often you're going to have Harleys coming by, dudes in their big diesel trucks, hot rods. And, it's always fun to show off in front of random strangers that you don't know, so they're momentarily impressed or repulsed.
Well, I've played music down at Crafted Tap House on, what is it, 5th and Sherman?
5th and Sherman.
I got it. And so you're playing live music out there, and then you got these hot rods coming down, and they like really let loose, and it just, so you kind of take a break.
Dudes looking for attention. So it can be really annoying. Well, apparently the city council this past year decided to pass a noise ordinance. So if you have really loud pipes, you get a $300 citation. I'm not certain how they can really enforce that. I don't know if they have decibel meters or how they're doing it.
That's what we were laughing about is, are they going to stand out with, because they do have dB meters that,
Look,
handheld.
I think it's good to have something similar. When I was in, working for the city of Liberty Lake, it's a golf community. And so they would allow golf carts on the arterials and city streets. So most of the time you left those folks alone. Yes, there were laws that pertained to driving these golf carts. But my philosophy was, if somebody wasn't doing something reckless to harm another individual or to harm themselves, like kids, I let it lie. I would selectively enforce if it actually looked to be dangerous or unsafe. I think it would be similar with the noise ordinance. Only get those dudes that are chronically or hot dogging it if you're going to truly do that. I wish that we lived in times where people, practice a little self-control Yeah, we get it. Your truck's cool. I have a diesel truck. I know it's really, really cool from a dead stop to floor that sucker. And before the turbo kicks in, get that big black bloom of smoke. But, it's this kind of behavior that always ruins it for everybody else. And so the city of Coeur d'Alene is within their right to pass an ordinance that they think is going to better improve the atmosphere of their city.
One thing I was thinking today, I was listening to the radio when I was driving around, and one of the news stories, national news story, is you had a couple people in the celebrity realm, one of which in 2020 said a naughty word. The guy said a naughty word. It's not socially acceptable. And he's got another celebrity now 4 years later advocating for him. He's a changed person. We really should bring him back into the community. And because he's been reformed, he's changed. He's not the same guy he used to be. And I mean, I'm looking at the cornfields as I'm driving, and I just like, this is so funny to me that we live in this world of like middle school or grade school tattletaling. We're tattletales.
Yep.
If you don't, the fact that 4 years after somebody used a naughty bad word and it's making national headlines, like being reported on all the news outlets, and he's not the same guy he used to be. What are we doing? And so that it's a little bit what this reminds me of in Coeur d'Alene. It's like, well, the people complaining because, well, your bike's too loud, your car's too loud, it's too loud, or I don't like what the words you're using or what you're saying, that's really offensive to me. And it just it takes me all the way back to the first grade when you don't like what Johnny or Sally said and the way they made you feel.
No, I can't say that you're wrong. Looks like we got a question down there.
What are the 4 biggest differences between you and Sheriff Norris?
4 biggest differences. Well, I'll throw you a 5th one, and I'll start with that one. I'm actually a lot taller and younger than Bob Norris.
Oh.
So that's one. Let's see. One is I've not been a career government employee. I have operated 2 commercial construction companies for 25 years, and I have a vast array of experience when it comes to the business world. Hiring, firing, HR, complex contracts, complex budgets, personnel, equipment. So that is one area of difference. The other one is that I've actually served my community for 12 years as a police officer for no pay. All the same liability, all the same exposure responsibilities as a full authority police officer, but I did it part-time after my regular job. And I did that for 12 years for my community. The third one is I'm endorsed by Sheriff Richard Mack as the constitutional sheriff candidate. Now, the reason that Sheriff Mack knows this is we've had long discussions about philosophies on the Constitution, and I've been a member of the Constitutional Sheriffs and Peace Officers Association for quite a while. But it comes down to this. If you're going to say you're a constitutional sheriff, you probably better have a pretty good understanding and knowledge of American history, going all the way back to the Mayflower Compact and John Carver when the Pilgrims came across from the other side of the pond, the early beginnings of colonial America, the French Indian War, the eventual declaration by the Americans that they are their own people, their own nation, the Revolutionary War, all the way through to the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, and the argument by the states at the delegation nominating committees as to why the Americans and the different colonies that became states should sign off on the Constitution. And when you understand a lot of what the founder said through reading the Federalist Papers and the Anti-Federalist Papers and understanding the history, you are much better prepared to protect the people in modern day time, their rights under the Constitution, because the sheriff protects the people's constitutional rights, those guarantees the government shall not infringe life, liberty, property found in the original 10 amendments to the Constitution. So, and then a 4th one is, I think it's a philosophy on what a sheriff should do. Bob Norris comes from 30 years working for the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department, which was arguably the most corrupt sheriff's department in the entire country, full of deputy gang problems, pay to play, scandal after scandal, the Linwood Viking scandals, pay to play with politicians that were getting special deputizations because they were donors to the sheriff. So Bob Norris comes from that culture, and he spent many years, by his own admission, handling federal agents under the JRIC charge that he was serving under. That's the Joint Regional Intelligence Center right after 9/11. So he worked quite a bit with Homeland Security, FBI, CIA. In fact, he says that he managed many of those assets, and he trained with the Mossad and with Israeli Defense Forces, I believe. He clearly has way too much familiarization with the feds. And when you work that close with them, when your position at JRIC is funded because of Homeland Security dollars post 9/11, well, look, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out that Bob Norris, who came to Kootenai County about 10 years ago, doesn't really understand our culture up here. He thinks that he does, but I've been in this community my entire life. I'm fourth generation from Spokane Valley that ended up in Kootenai County. But I have never trained with the FBI except for an active shooter course that all law enforcement goes through locally. But I have not been to FLETC. I've never done any
What's
advanced
FLETC?
Federal Law Enforcement Training
There
Center.
you go.
Yeah,
Some of us don't speak that.
So I have zero allegiance. In fact, I have an extreme distaste for the FBI and most federal law enforcement agencies that are out of control, unaccountable. And by the way, I'm happy with the newest Supreme Court decision, Chevron, which nullifies a lot of these fourth branch, unelected bureaucrats that think that they can just come around and tell us what to do. So yeah, big difference between Bob and I is I'm a local guy that will stand between the federal government and the people here.
I'm going to take this one a step further because earlier in the program, Dan was talking about the KCRCC vetting survey. So I'm going to put this up on the screen for you guys to look at quickly. We put together this document that shows the Dan Wilson and Sheriff Bob Norris answers to that vetting survey, color coded. It shows them side by side. And we're not going to go through the whole thing right now. I just want you to go to the idahosheriff.com and pull this up. It's just going to take you a handful of minutes to read, but the stark contrast, if you want to understand the difference between the character and substance of Dan Wilson side by side to the very lightweight, shallow answers of Bob Norris, we have done that in a very visual fashion, and it's very telling.
Look, you got to go to page 3. I want to just go ahead and read when we're talking about the differences. 4, there's many more than 4, but if you go to page 3. Here's one example. Describe why you are running for this particular office. And I said, I will be the sheriff to protect all of Kootenai County citizens' rights with leadership, enthusiasm, innovation, and extreme ownership. I will become the buffer between an out-of-control federal government and the people. Here's Bob Norris's answer to the same question. Describe why you are running for this particular office. Protect our rights and community. That was his answer. What are your qualifications? And I won't go down the whole list, but I listed 8 reasons why I'm qualified. And Bob's was one sentence, 33 years law enforcement background. And folks, this really is at the root of the problem with the position of the sheriff. Remember, the sheriff is an elected position, elected by the people in his community or her community. And it does not require a lifetime of service as a career government employee that has only been in law enforcement and no other practical experience, only the tunnel vision of being a guy of law and order. Lock them up. Well, in the state of Idaho, our brilliant founders here said there was only 3 qualifications to be a sheriff elected by the people. You have to be 21 years of age. You have to be a citizen of the United States, and you have to reside in the county that you are running for sheriff in. Now, I want to tell people that it is a misnomer that the sheriff has to have 20 and 30 years of law enforcement experience. The sheriff is a limited representative because every 4 years it gets changed out. And the undersheriff is the individual or the chief deputy who normally manages the day-to-day operations of the sheriff's office. The sheriff himself meets with the people. He is the CEO. He helps oversee the operations of the sheriff's office with new visions and policies and the culture. But also, most importantly, the sheriff is responsible for looking out at the horizon at what threats lie ahead, what threats are at the door, and to prepare the county accordingly by use of his own staff and in cooperation with the Board of County Commissioners, the coroner, and other agencies by elected officials. So look, in this day and time we're living in, nobody in Kootenai County has gotten us ready at a government level for the next end run around the Constitution like they did the neo-Marxist in 2020 when they told you 15 days to stop the spread. Don't go to church. Don't gather with loved ones. Stay home. Your business is not essential, but if you're a big national chain, your business is very essential. Don't go to this group. Don't go to that group. You can't go to funerals. You can't have weddings. You can't have graduations. And I know that I'm talking to folks out there right now that have experienced loss of something they will never get back because of these tyrannical lockdowns that happened more severely at the local county level, I would argue, than happened in the state or at the federal level. But nobody has dared. When we saw that Biden was installed, we knew the border was going to be wide open. We knew that millions of invaders were going to come through this country, and they're all around us. Even if you don't see them right now, I guarantee you they're around us. And we saw the disproportion, the 2 tiers of justice, while we were being told to stay home and wear your mask and social distance. If you want to loot, burn, and destroy cities in protest, it was called peaceful protesting. While billions of dollars worth of infrastructure were destroyed, you could take over federal law enforcement buildings and federal courts. You could take over city blocks. You didn't have to social distance and you didn't have to wear your mask, but it was okay. And that's when we knew that the 15 days to stop the spread was an outright lie. Now, some of us, sons of liberty, we saw that danger on the horizon and we acted accordingly long before it got on our doorstep. And I never complied with any of the lockdowns. We ran our construction companies in the state of Washington full speed ahead. I hired more employees during COVID than I did before or after. We did many great things that year, but my opponent, Mr. Career Law Enforcement Officer, he was running in 2020 and he was lecturing we the people. If you go to my Instagram page and scroll back to around January or February, you'll see the video where he is lecturing people that they need to stay home and that they need to listen to trusted sources like the CDC, Panhandle Health, the Idaho Department of Health and Welfare. And he had observed when he was driving around town, many times groups that were gathering in more than 10 people. And he was chastising the people for doing that. And now he says, well, I didn't know then what I know now. Well, here's what I know, Bob, is you're a loser. Because Sons of Liberty, and I'm surrounded by sons and daughters of liberty in Kootenai County and all over this region and in this country that saw it for what it was and they didn't buy off on it. And it's pretty embarrassing for you to have ever claimed to trust somebody like the CDC when we find out 4 years later, it was all a lie. That's why you don't want a career law enforcement guy standing in the gap for the people because he's too used to following rules. He's too used to being told what to do. And that's exactly how it ran in the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department. Now, Captain Mike Bauer, who ran against Bob last time and in this current primary, was part of the old Sherman Block days when there was integrity with the Los Angeles Sheriff's Department and they were leading edge along with the LAPD. But it was after 9/11 when Bauer exited and retired because he saw the writing on the wall. But Bob continued in that agency for many, many years later. And Bob doesn't understand what true liberty is. He says that he's never going to enforce a red flag law. But I have a question for Bob. Doesn't Los Angeles County have some of the most strict gun control laws in the entire country, the state of California? And I'd like to know, Bob, how many times did you personally see somebody's firearms without due process just because there's a state law that says, if they're charged with a DV, we got to take their firearms away. If there's an order of protection, we got to take their firearms away. And you have the audacity to come in and say that while I was a reserve officer, I didn't make an official public statement in my reserve capacity saying that I wouldn't violate the people's rights. But I'm pretty certain that you were a supervisor. And I'll bet you if we dug far enough, we'd find out that Supervisor Bob, the sergeant that was promoted right after he gave $600 to Under Sheriff Paul Tanaka in his run for Gardena mayor. Interesting how that happens, but it's not pay to play. I'll bet you anything, Bob, that at some point in your career, you absolutely violated somebody's rights. So don't try to come in and lecture me off the side and plant these seeds that are absolutely hogwash. At least I was doing something during COVID. And by the way, you hadn't been a cop for almost 10 years before you stepped into the office of the sheriff. You were retired for what? Almost 7-8 years on your $130,000 a year. That's now $180,000 a year. Disability retirement.
He's probably a little rusty even from his desk job at that point.
Well, look, we, the people, need to know what his medical disposition is, what the terms of his settlement was with Lacera. And Bob says it's only a 12% and a 13% shoulder injury that gave him $180,000, what's now grown to $180,000 a year. And a good portion of that is not taxable by the IRS. And with all the emotional outbursts where he is continually crying, if you go to the idahosheriff.com and go to the Instagram pages that show Bob Norris's outbursts, he frequently is caught crying at the most ridiculous, mundane things. And I don't know. Do you have something queued up there?
Well, yeah, we got a couple of choices. We do have some questions,
Let's get to those
waiting
questions.
in the wings. We also have the video of Bob Norris telling us that we shouldn't be gathering in groups larger
Do the
than
question
10.
first.
Yeah, of course. I'm getting to it. How do you improve the relationship between the sheriff department and the local small police departments?
Yeah. Well, the very first thing that Dan Wilson is going to do is I'm going to personally go and visit or invite them wherever they choose to meet with me. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to get to know each chief. I'm going to find out what their background is, what their strengths are, what specialties they have, and then I'm going to pledge the support of the Kootenai County Sheriff's Office to assist each one of these agencies in whatever capacity that we can, and vice versa. I'm going to expect being able to share resources with them and their expertise and their wisdom and collaboration, because every one of these cities still has my citizens in the county. And as the chief law enforcement officer of the county, every citizen that is in Post Falls, every citizen that is in Coeur d'Alene, Spirit Lake, Rathdrum, look, they're all just as important to me. So yeah, I'm going to rely heavily on the expertise of some pretty good chiefs that we have right in our backyard.
Okay, another question from Instagram channel. Let me toggle over here. Trying to multitask. When you become sheriff, how are you going to lessen the fentanyl and homeless problems in the county?
Well, the fentanyl problem is always going to be a challenge as long as the federal government is at war with we the people by allowing, in fact, promoting this illegal invasion across our southern border. It's like a ship. If you got a hole in it and nobody plugs that hole, you can bail water as much as you can. Now, in this, but you're eventually going to sink. Fentanyl is sent here specifically to kill Americans. And it's not just overdosing that we tend to think of as a drug problem. So you have an addict that ODs on heroin or meth or whatever, but understand it's also a poison. And they are lacing all sorts of products, consumables, other drugs, lesser gateway drugs, candy, and children are getting in contact with this and they are dying. Now, I haven't seen the latest stats because stats tend to lag a little bit, but there was over 350 people that died in Idaho, I believe, in 2022. Now, Washington State, just to the west of us, leads the nation in fentanyl deaths, and it's well over 100,000. So, yeah, it's a very huge problem. But one of the things that we can do is we can start going after the NGOs that are helping move this stuff across our borders. And we need to form task forces. In fact, you don't have to use the FBI. There is a national coalition of law enforcement intelligence agencies, and we're going to start working with our partners, coming up with solutions on how to target these NGOs that are up here working to subvert our laws and to bring everything from fentanyl and human trafficking through our communities and dropping off invaders to, soak up all of our valuable resources. But that's really, until we can get the border closed down, the best we can do is start making this county extremely hard for any of these co-conspirators that want to attempt to bring it through our counties and be more vigilant with our intel.
Do we have a homeless problem? Or are there no early warning indicators of a homeless problem?
Well, I get this question quite a bit. And what are you going to do about it? Remember that the sheriff enforces things from a law enforcement standpoint, primarily in unincorporated county areas. So City of Coeur d'Alene, Post Falls, Rathdrum, Spirit Lake, they all have their own ordinances that have to also be in compliance with state law. So I think that, when we start to see any hot spots happening, then we address it accordingly. But here's the problem. The homeless epidemic that has blown up in the past 15 years is fueled by many different causes. But the biggest cause that I personally witnessed as to why we have nothing proactive happening for the homeless is due to the fact that we're not forcing some of these individuals and to give them choices. And the choices should be, you can go into a program like the Union Gospel Mission or whatever, where there are rules and things that you have to do in order to stay at these facilities while you're either getting clean and or looking for temporary housing. And when you just give people shelter without any responsibility, it's not appreciated. So if you want to fix a lot of the homeless problem that is really, and I ran this stat years ago, it's unofficial, but I asked some of my mental health expert friends, what percentage of mental health issues today stem from illegal drug use? And their belief is that it's the vast majority, whatever percentage. I don't want to sign that because I'll get misquoted, but it's
goes
hand in hand. So responsibility is always the best thing to do for our people. If you love your fellow citizen, Proverbs talks about all the time, woe to those who step on the poor. When you take advantage of the poor, there's judgment coming. And sometimes what that means is taking advantage because developers get to put in these big housing units to house the homeless. And it's a money scam. And they're not doing it necessarily for love of their fellow man, but they're doing it to get rich. So a lot of schemes, a lot of scams going on, and it's not going to be fixed anytime soon.
I was hearing, I think yesterday, we had somebody who's a leader in our community that sometime back had actually spent a lot of time over the course of probably months with somebody who was rehabilitating, who had been an addict and was rehabilitating and wanted to work back toward a clean life and stability. And it made me think, how many of us are willing to take that kind of sacrifice? It doesn't mean that you're bringing them in and saying, hey, you can live here. But it's tough to even sometimes dedicate your time once a week to somebody who maybe needs that type of support, that level of support in their life, because it interrupts your life. And so you have to question yourself, what am I personally willing to do for somebody in my community or even in my friend circle who I see is struggling, and maybe not to that point of homelessness yet, but it's at a place where you can see that eventually happening, and you can maybe intervene before it gets to that point.
Yeah.
I mean, it's part of with your campaign for sheriff of Kootenai County is, rather than saying, I don't see early warning indicators, it's, we still need to have a plan. We still need to have a plan for these things that we see already are problems in larger cities, or cities that are adhere to more government control and that sort of thing. We think, okay, we're free here, we're not experiencing those things. It doesn't mean you don't make a plan.
People are shocked to find out that the founders actually believed in welfare early on, and they enacted some of it, but it's far different from then what it is today.
Oh, now that sounds like an interesting.
And what they believed is we have an obligation as a society to look after orphans and widows in their distress. But it was not what it's become today, which is forcing people to become dependent on the government with no accountability. In 2020, during COVID, my companies built 2 City of Spokane emergency warming shelters. So there were beds and places for people to get out of the elements. And the City of Spokane, and I'm certain it was through, big government grants, built these buildings at quite a expensive dollar amount to house people who could come in, and really the rules were not enforced. They let a third party operate them. And they could come in there with dogs and, all sorts of paraphernalia. And within a year, they had destroyed one of the expensive shelters that we had just completed the year before we went back in to do some more work. But when people have no stake in it, when there is no accountability, they're not going to get better. And so, yes, we do have an obligation to care for those that are in need. It is wrong for us to continue to enable people by not helping them come to better choices and let them act like civilized people.
We have, getting down toward the end of the hour, I really want to talk about something that a lot of us in the community have seen, because we've seen promotional flyers for hanging up in some of the coffee shops, or you've seen the digital invitations for Sheriff Bob Norris, Coffee with Your Sheriff.
Oh, yes. The Coffee with the Sheriff. I'm glad you brought this up.
Oh, I can't wait to talk about this.
If you're in Kootenai County, you have seen that Bob Norris frequently on both his official Kootenai County Sheriff social media pages, Instagram, Facebook, as well as the personal campaign, he talks about these, announcements of these Coffee with Your Sheriff, and you can pull one up. This is a standard one. He has them usually in the middle of the week. It's a chance for people to come up and have what's it say? What does it say on there? I can't see it
Coffee with Sheriff Robert Bob Norris.
Mm-hmm.
Sheriff Robert Bob Norris welcomes members of the Coeur d'Alene community and KCSO's Coffee with Your Sheriff event.
Yeah.
The sheriff and members of the administration will be available to address your... Well, the font is very small. I'm doing my best. Yeah. But they're going to address your questions in the Coeur d'Alene community and get your individual feedback. That's what they're going to do.
So I've long contended these are nothing more than campaign events that are disguised as a town hall. And the reason I say that is I've been to some of these events. And when you have a local coffee where the sheriff comes to, like a Super One coffee area, or to a small restaurant, or the Legion, or whatever he's going to, this is normally middle of the week, 9-10 o'clock in the morning, when most everyone in the world is either at work or school. And he brings 12 of his deputies along with him, an entourage, to these events where it's supposed to be a conversation between the sheriff and the people. The sheriff should be so well informed of his office and his agency that anything that you, the people, have to ask a sheriff, the sheriff should be able to answer you. And if he doesn't know that question, he can come and get that information and bring it back to you. But to bring jail captains, to bring patrol captains, to bring lieutenants and sergeants. Now, again, people are saying, well, so what, Wilson? That's just part of, community outreach. No, it's not. It's 100% waste of Kootenai County resources. Remember, this year's budget went from $46 million to over $50 million. And
but
they're asking,
these coffee things can't be dipping into the budget
well,
that much.
What happens is you have overtime and other things you have to pay for non-hourly employees. Now, I wanted to be fair, so I put in a records request to the Kootenai County Sheriff's Office, specifically asking them to provide every coffee or breakfast with your sheriff for the years 2023 and 2024, and the total amount of deputies by rank for each event. Now, each event is roughly 2 hours. What I got back was pretty humorous. In 2023, there were 7 events total. So all of calendar year 2023, over 12 months, 7 of these events took place. In 2024, from January through May, there was 12. So well over a, almost 60% increase, 45, I guess it'd be 45% increase just through May. And when you do the math, because the records request came back, no known records exist. So Kootenai County doesn't actually use the correct industry standard process for keeping track of deputies and times. Apparently, there's no accountability there. But when you figure 12 of your staff times 2 hours times those events at $100 county cost per hour, that's the salary, the loaded benefits, the vehicles, all the accessories, you average about $100. In 2023, those coffee events cost the taxpayers around $17,000. And in 2024 to date, well, it was actually to date through May, it's been over $30,000. So you're talking at close to $45,000 of county taxpayers' treasure being spent so Bob can look like a big shot to all the gray hairs that show up at these coffee with your sheriff events.
Because these are during work hours, Monday through Friday, typically early 8, 9 o'clock in the morning when most of us are at work.
Yeah.
And so in the times we visited, what you see is a recycling of a lot of the same people who are retirees and Bob Norris fans.
Supporters and fans. Look, it's not like I'm saying that Bob can't do an event. The sheriff has to be out there with the people, but we're looking for patterns, folks. And I'm telling you right now, and you can ask any other law enforcement agency outside of Kootenai County, is it weird if your sheriff shows up for a hour-long coffee time and he brings 12 of his staff members on a regular basis? I mean, we have 18 deputies slots that we need to fill at Kootenai County Sheriff's Office. The jail's always running on overtime. The budgets mirror that this year. They reflect the problems with manpower that Bob hasn't been able to fix in 4 years in the jail. So why is he taking all of this personnel off of normal patrol functions and the jail and investigations and bringing them to prop himself up? And I've said this before, Bob doesn't know how to operate by himself if he's not surrounded by his deputies or that special deputy and county commissioner that he gave a special deputization to, Bruce Matari. So, yeah, special deputy.
That's the first time his name came up in the hour.
I know. It is the only county commissioner out of the 3 that has access to privileged information, and he's a politician. And despite what he says, he does have access to privileged information. He signed a non-disclosure agreement. Folks, you got to start helping me spread the word about the pay-to-play crap that Bob Norris is doing, whether it's the helicopter program, whether it is covering up for deputies that crash their vehicles, off-duty hit and runs, whether it's deputies that strike children in a crosswalk and there doesn't seem to be anything moving on that, or a recent one with a deputy in a DV. Look, Dan Wilson, when I get into office, we're going to change things. We're going to hold people accountable. If the deputies and the staff have been doing righteous things, they will be rewarded. But if any deputy is caught doing something below board or illegal, they will answer to me. So I can promise all you deputies out there this: if you're doing the righteous thing, I will be in your corner. But if you're doing bad things, I will be your worst nightmare. And me and the Deputy Sheriff's Association are going to be dancing before long. They've received quite a lot of money that they have used with their PAC to promote Bob Norris and those non-KCRCC vetted choices. Now, Bruce and Bob were both backed by the KCRCC, and they went and backstabbed the KCRCC by promoting through the Deputy Sheriff's Association, the Fraternal Order of Police, it's the deputy union, who used their money and the sheriff's office badge on their official mailer, so it looked like it was an endorsement of the Kootenai County Sheriff's Office, to promote two county commissioners that were not approved by the KCRCC. And more importantly, if you happen to be a precinct committee member who lost your position due to the backstabbing that Bob Morris and Bruce Matari did, I understand. No hard feelings. I support you. And I absolutely believe that Bruce and Bob should be held accountable, along with Bruce's wife, Carla Matari, who is running the Fraternal Order of Police's Facebook page while she was also the secretary of the KCRCC. Go to my website, theidahosheriff.com, look through my videos, look at the hour-and-a-half long special, All Roads Lead to Matari. People in Kootenai County, do not forget what Bob and Bruce did to you guys when they knew that there was no consequence because Bob had already been endorsed by the KCRCC. He went right back around you guys. He made you look the fool. They spent a lot of money. That Deputy Sheriff's Association is the same deputies that also support Bob Norris and hold levels of position of leadership and command staff in his sheriff's office. So, folks, we're out of time. God bless you all. It is the 4th of July.
Yeah, I was going to say, remind us of the parade tomorrow morning one more time, and then take us out of here.
4th of July tomorrow. Come join me as we walk through the streets of beautiful Coeur d'Alene, celebrating the message of liberty without compromise. The first now 28, since we've lost 2 already.
Hey, they're going, the T-shirts, they're going like hotcakes.
You got to get down there right on time at 8 a.m. Please do not be late. We're going to have a lot of fun. Bring your American flag, your American attitude and spirit. Look,
your cowboy hat.
Do not despair. Be encouraged by the founders and what they wrote 248 years ago when they declared their independence from a tyrannical, out of control king. Man, it looks like that America is headed right back that way. Be strong and of good courage. We didn't descend from fearful men. Don't be at all concerned with what's going on to the point of despair. Be hopeful. Be good people. God bless you. God bless Kootenai County, and may God bless the United States of America. Good night.